Hello everybody. I just got back from visiting my very friendly local Office Depot, and I wanted to show you what kind of goodies I got. We're going out on tour in a couple of days actually, and by the time you see this video, we'll already have started our little tour, including this show that I'm going to talk to you about. This video is going to be all about the plots and the patch that we're going to be using for this Zomboy Rott N Roll Part 2 tour. If you didn't know already, maybe you don't follow me on Instagram, or maybe you just have a life outside of the internet, then you probably don't know this, but we are going around the United States over the next 2 months. Anyways, today I'm going to be showing you these awesome laminated tour patch sheets, as well as the plot and why it's important to bring these things with you on tour. Oh, almost forgot. Yeah, the lamination thing is cool, but there's one other piece I'm forgetting, and that is the big plots. These are, well, there's 3 of them, and they are top-down patch sheets of our show. And this is, let me make sure I have it oriented correctly here. There we go. So these are 24-inch tall by 36-inch wide 2D plots, as well as you'll see on here there are some 3D inset views. Actually, I'll just put here for a second. So this is the main 2D part of the plot. It's top down, and we'll go over all of this stuff on the computer. I'm just kind of showing you the scale of things. And then in here we have our inset views, 3 of them, to just kind of give a 3D representation of what people are to expect when we come to their venue. These are the big versions. Like I said, we've got 3 of these. The reason I have 3 of these, and they're not laminated, is because we only really need 1, but we're going to be using 1 on our prep day. That is this Sunday. That's Past Christians coming up Sunday. By the time you see this, we'll already have used 1 of these for prep. And then we take all of them on the road, and I'll probably keep 2 in my work box that'll stay in there in case we lose the main one, and they're just really for backup. I don't laminate them because laminating the big plots makes it kind of hard to handle. It's easier to just roll them up and keep them in a rubber band. Other than that, this is the first time I've done laminated plots and patch sheets. So this is also the show that's on the screen back here. This plot is only for the ground package. But later in this video, I'm going to be going over what this plot looks like for the stage I designed, and I'm going to be running the show in Tacoma coming up next weekend. So in a bit here, we'll jump over to the computer and we'll kind of go over the detail of what makes up a plot and how to read a plot and how to hopefully draw a plot as well. At least the basics of it. We won't go over everything in detail because it's not really that complex of a show. So I've got a couple copies here of laminated patches. So these are not as critical, but it is important for prep, for everybody who's prepping our lights at the Christie Lights shop, to have everything a quick reference to be able to look at. So I've got, let's see, 4 copies, 4 laminated plots. And these are relatively cheap to get made. It's literally just a 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper that is laminated. If for whatever reason you have multiple pages, I would do front and back. And then if your ground package has more than like a front and back's worth of, more than just like 1 page front and back worth of fixtures or instruments, I would probably just go ahead and make a little binder or booklet instead. I wouldn't be doing laminated sheets of paper like this. But since we do fit it all on 1 page, these are easy to hand out to local stagehands who are helping to build everything. So you can show up and hand one of these pieces of paper, laminated paper, to your local crew lead, and they can get a really quick bird's eye view of what everything is going to look like. And that's what this is. This is just a top-down view with a couple of basic measurements. You don't need to provide absolutely everything in here. You just need to give them something to go off of to have an idea of how everything goes and goes together. So yeah, these will be fun to just kind of throw in the work box and use from show to show. I'm going to show you guys these as well. If you watched my my China video, you'll recognize, oh, if I don't drop them here, you'll recognize these. These are sticker sheets with labels from, I think, Avery. I'll link all of the products down below so you can use these on your own shows. They're just address labels, but it has all of the fixture information that relates to the patch as well. So when you show up to a venue, these will be taped onto the fixtures. I'll go into detail why these don't actually go directly on the fixtures. It's a stupid, neurotic layering way to do it so that it doesn't actually stick to the base of the fixture, but you lay down a base coat or primer of gaff tape, black gaff. The sticker goes on top of the black gaff because gaff is easy to remove. And then there's a third layer of clear packing tape that goes over top of that. So you've got, it's a sandwich really. So you've got your gaff on the bottom that goes directly on the fixture, fixture label, and then clear packing tape on top. But we'll go over that in the prep video. Yeah, so this just has the type of fixture, the address, the mode, and the power outlet, or the power circuit that it is getting its power from. So let's hop over to the computer and we'll take a closer look at one of these plots. So we're gonna pop over into Capture, that is the design software that I used for this particular show. And we can see I have a full screen visualization. It's not really a visualization, it's like a 3D model of what the stage looks like. We can make it a visualization by changing the view mode or view type. You can see all the beams of light and everything. But we're more concerned with this view right here because this is showing all the different elements and how they interact with each other in 3D space. So you can see everything is layered, everything has its own separate little piece of the world that it exists in. But there are a couple problems with this. Now, it would be nice if I could get everybody involved with the project to be on the same page with this 3D. If they could just look at this 3D model and kind of like spin it around and be able to see where everything lands, there would be not very many questions about what has to happen and what has to happen when. Now, 3D models are great for certain purposes, like if you want to pre-visualize and do some pre-programming, if you want to sell something to a client, they're really great for that. But 3D models are not the best for actually putting on a show and actually building a show. There's a couple reasons for that. For one thing, 3D models, especially when they're in a perspective view, don't really give a good sense of relative scale between objects if they're different distances away from your camera that you're viewing the stage on. And secondly, not everyone who is helping to build your stage on the day of the show, usually stagehands, they don't have a way of accessing this 3D model to fly around it and be able to look at where everything is. So for those reasons alone, it's really beneficial to have top-down and front-facing 2D plots available for the build. And thankfully, Capture has a decent built-in plotting capability. So if I take one of my views here, we've got alpha, beta, and gamma, which we can change the view on. We can do all sorts of things. We can look at patch pay-per-views, pay-per-views, not pay-per-view. That's kind of funny. And I'm just going to show you a little bit of usage with filters here. So I'm going to enlarge this view, and this is kind of a top-down version of the entire stage with everything overlaid on it. In fact, you can even see the 2D crowd models that I have, as well as the barricade and things like the audio points. We do have different filters that we can apply. So let's just go ahead and go over to our filters. And if I drag this Kelsey filter on top of my alpha view, this is now showing only the objects that my good friend Kelsey is in charge of. He is going to be the, let me explain it this way. So the tour rig is all the stuff on the ground, the stuff you saw on the plots when we were sitting over on the chair by the MA over there. Now, for this particular show, I had to redesign everything to look way bigger in the Tacoma Dome because it's just such a more massive space than the show is designed to fit in just natively. So Christie Lights is also providing the same gear, but as an auxiliary package for this particular show. And that is what we're looking at here. That's this view. So Kelsey is in charge of making sure all of this works and gets in the air. And it even works in 3D too. So all the filters apply to all types of views, including rendering views. I don't know how this would be useful really to just render, but I guess you can see where the Viper is pointing. And it's kind of funny, I guess learn something new. Even if something is filtered out, it still casts a shadow. Because we don't have any CDJs here, just the table, and no monitors, and no Josh, but they're casting ghost shadows. That's pretty funny. Okay, so we've got our different filtered views, but it's not really useful to show you this in Capture because you're not going to really have Capture if you show up on a show site. I do usually have my laptop set up and you can navigate around in it, but it's easier to just have a bunch of big, easy to read plots. And that is what we have under our plots tab here. And so you can see I've built, let's see, what is this, 8 different plots, 9 different plots. And these are all for different purposes, and these are all given to different people for different reasons. So this particular plot, if you see here, this is called Patch Ground Top, which is pretty self-explanatory. This is all the fixtures that are going to be on the stage deck and where they are and what they're plugged into and what universe they're in and what their address is. The only thing that this does not show is the mode, curiously enough. This plot view right here is probably the most important to me as far as making a good combined plot. This is 4 views. It kind of replicates the Capture for window design philosophy. But the reason I do this is because I remember when I was a stagehand and I was building shows, it was sometimes really difficult for me to understand from just a top-down view where things are in relation to each other, what stuff is hanging in the air, what's on the ground, what's overlapping, and the order that things get built in. Because a lot of times, the shows I was working on, the designers, it was just literally a black and white 2D plot. And now that I've been on the receiving end of really bad, really low resolution, not very well printed plots, I have pretty much sworn to never do that to anybody else. So here you can see this is kind of what I'm able to give local people when I show up to do a show, in lieu of being able to give them a 3D model. So this will hopefully give them a good perspective of the space that the stage lives in, and where everything goes, how many fixtures there are, and why we're doing the things that we're doing. We also have a dedicated rigging plot. Now, this particular plot, I want to make a note that I'm not a rigger, I'm not rigging certified. I know the basics enough to pretty much be dangerous on a show site. This is purely an idea to get of how many points we're going to need. So usually this is all sent off after the design is finalized. It'll be sent off to, in this case, Matt Clemish of Precision Rigging. He's one of the companies that is in the same shop that I have my gear in, with R90 and Positive Systems. R90 and Positive Systems, those are the other 2 companies there. So I'll export a 3D CAD.dwg file, send it over to Matt, and he will do all the load calculations. He'll account for how much cable weighs, things that I can't really do in Capture. And he'll make sure that we can do the show safely with the right amount of gear. And this, like I said, is more of a ballpark to see where things land. And then these last couple views here, these are full-size 24 by 36, that size that's rolled up here. Those are large versions of the 3D plots. These are to show the people who pay for the show where everything is, what everything is doing, so it can get approved. So these are those things I send to get approved, and then these plots are the ones that actually have the data on them. So speaking of data, let's open up one of these plots and actually get down to it and see what data is actually included on the plot. So if we just take a quick look at our top-down air plot, which is showing all of the fixtures that are going to be hung in this F-type truss, most of that will actually be done in advance of the show. The only thing that's really going to happen on show site is these trusses will be linked together with pins, and they're like spigots and pins. They'll be angled, and then these JDC ones that are hanging off of the front edge of the truss, the top cord, will be yoked out. So they'll probably be, riding vertically, and then when they get on show site, we'll just pop them out. I think that's the plan right now. Kelsey's the guy who has the build plan on everything, but we will see. So let's take a look at this segment right here. Drag a little bit over so we can see a little better. So you can see we have two different types of instruments here. One of them is a JDC1, and one of them is a Mac Axiom hybrid. The red one is the Axiom, the yellow one is the JDC1. Now, if you didn't know that, say you've never worked on a show before, you don't know the difference between the two, we do have a little key down here that is both by color and shape. So you can see Mac Axiom hybrid and JDC1 strobe. We also have a little bit of labeling on the truss elements as well. All of these individual pieces or segments of truss are labeled as truss A. So truss A is populated on all of the pieces of truss throughout the top view. So that's truss A, and that is truss B. I do this by continuity, so any truss that is physically connected to another piece of truss all gets the same letter. And then different segments or different structures of truss get different letters. Right now, we only have two on this show, and this is useful because on these patch sheets, let's see if I have one right here, labeling location is super important because on the patch sheets that we're using to build this show, there's a little, there's a cell, next to everything else that's just as important, like the circuit and the universe and the address. There's also a location cell. So the location will say truss A, truss B, upstage ground, midstage center, and that makes sure that the right address and the right light are being placed in the right location. So that refers to these location markers, truss A. Let's take a little bit of a closer look at this JDC1, for example. So you can see we've got a bunch of letters and numbers here that if you're just glancing at it, you might be a little bit confused by, and that's okay. So we're going to go through it here. Anytime you see ML or anything like that, you're going to be talking about power or moving light power. This is kind of a throwback to when there were a lot more conventional rigs than moving light rigs, whereas now it's pretty much flip-flop. Now you have more moving light and 208 volt powered rigs than you have 120 volt dim rigs. And that's where this comes in. So ML refers to the type of voltage of the breakout in this case. The breakout being the place where the multi-pin cable lands on the truss and breaks out to the different instruments. So this is ML 10-3. So what does that mean? That means that it is the 10th moving light breakout, and it is the third circuit on that breakout. So you can see we've got its neighbors here, ML 10-1, 10-2, 10-3, 10-4, 10-5, 10-6, all the way down here. So these 6 JDC1s are splitting up their power along one breakout that has 6 circuits on it. So that's pretty convenient. Wow, it's like I almost thought of that when I put this together. So these 6 JDCs are solo because they take too much power if they are ganged together, so we cannot twofer them. They each have their own individual circuit. So on a more advanced plot, and this is more just a prep plot, the breakout will be marked somewhere around here. It's going to, the breakout is going to live somewhere around here and then splay outwards, and then connect to these instruments as needed. Let's look at a couple other things on this instrument. H.298. This is one of my more major annoyances with Capture and the default way that they indicate universes. Universes are labeled by letter first, and then a decimal, and then the start address of the fixture. The start address is the first address of the fixture. That's the one that you see in the menu when it pops up on the screen when you go to change the address, or if you're flipping dip switches, that is the start address of that fixture and where it lives in a DMX universe. These particular fixtures have 62 channels in the mode that I'm set up for. So while the start address is at 298, it's actually occupying 298 and another 61 channels after that. So that whole section is reserved for this one fixture's control. And then this last number in the circle here is the unit number. Those are just sequential by 1, starting with the first fixture in a series. Now that might sound a little confusing, but let me pop over into the combined plot. So what I mean by the first in a series or first in 100 series is each fixture type, sometimes fixture location also gets granulated down a little further, but every fixture type starts with a hundreds series. So if I were just to import all my fixtures into a file, everyone would have an individual ID number, right? So if we have 120 fixtures, it would just be like 1 through 120. But I make it a little easier to understand which fixtures are where, both on the plot, in my mind, on the MA. Everything is just easier if you start with the hundreds digit. So fixture 101 is the first spot fixture on the rig. And lo and behold, here we have fixture 101, followed by 102, 103, 104. So if we added more fixtures, the next one, no matter where it would be 105. And that is the case with this patch in the air. We have on truss B, another spot fixture, fixture 105. It's the same thing with the axioms, right? So those I consider my beam fixtures, even though they're hybrids and they can do both jobs pretty well. I start them off in the 200s. So this is 201, 202, 203, all the way to 208. We jump the truss, and then we start at 209, 210, all the way to 216. Then we continue in the air. So if 216 was our last on the ground, we should have, and there it is, 217, 218, 219, all the way across. And then the JDCs skip over to the 300 series, so on and so forth. So if I wanted to, say, add a symbol for a breakout, what I can do is I can go over into my generic folder in my symbols, and I can put, let's say, a power bolt here. Let's just make that symbol for the breakout. You can see it's invisible now because in this view, I have Kelsey's profile or filter applied. So now what I can do is I can call this ML10, and it is now labeled as ML10, and I can increase the scale of that bolt. I can add a layer and call this Power Kelsey. We can make it a different color so it's easy to identify. Call it orange, and the paper color will also be orange, and we have to remember to drag it onto our paper. So now we can say you see how it's like behind the truss right now? If we want it to have a higher priority, all we do is we change the paper priority to high. And now we can see that ML10 breaks out here. Whoops. And we could even go one step further. We see we have ML8 right next door. We can copy this by dragging the copy symbol, hit enter, and then change the label to ML8. So now we have both ML8 and ML10 breaking out on this truss, and it's easy to see that. And now if we go and re-export our trusses, or excuse me, re-export our patches, re-export our plots, that'll show up on the plots. So as you can see, it is important to have a easy to read plot, especially when you're going into a different venue that may have different specifications, different widths of the stage every night. So when we're going out on tour, we show up in the morning, we meet a new crew, we give them all this information, and we build the stage. So you can see it's important to have easy to read information. So you can see it's really important to have everybody on the same page, and that's what these plots do. Now, in all fairness, this particular show is not overly complex as far as space constraints or having to have a lot of departments work together. It's really just lighting, stage deck provided by the venue, LED screen. It all fits within the same plot and is easy to look at all at the same time. But if you have maybe different levels of a convention center that have similar floor plots, or you have different types of vendors entirely, like you could have catering that needs to know where tables are placed, but maybe your lighting plot doesn't need to have those tables on it. So it's all important to keep those things in mind when you're generating plots for your shows. Anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed this quick little glimpse into how to read and look at a plot and draw a basic plot as well. I'm not an experienced plot drawer or anything like that. I just wanted to share this particular show that I designed, and hope you found some useful information out of this video. If you did, make sure to hit like, subscribe, and maybe check out my Patreon or the links down below for my social media and other stuff that you might see in this video. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.